Alright, this is going to be an update and forecast for the Washburn Fire. Just going to post that in there. Let me know if you guys have any questions throughout this video, and I'll be sure to try to answer those in my next update. But first things first, we'll just try to get an idea of where this fire is, where the hot spots are, where the fire perimeter is, what structures might be involved. And then after that, we're going to look at the fire forecast to see where this fire is likely to spread in the future. So if we just take a look at our satellite imagery, it's always the best place to start because you can perfectly see where this fire is right there. We can even zoom in a little bit. And yeah, you see the smoke coming off of the fire. One thing I will say just right off the bat, it doesn't look like it's exceptionally active right now. We definitely have some smoke coming off of it, and it looks like there is maybe some larger plumes in the last hour or two. Right here you can start to see some of those bigger clouds pop up. But again, not as bad as some of the fires that we saw last season. That's somewhat expected because we still are a bit early in the fire season. Fuels aren't as dry as they will be in October or September, November, around that time when we get the really big fires. But we do have a lot of dead and dry fuels up in this area, so definitely going to be important to watch this fire as it continues. And actually, one other thing we can do on the satellite imagery is see if we can actually pick up the heat signature coming off on this. And I think that's actually some good news as well. It looks like it's starting to get a little brighter at the end of that video right there. But remember on like the Dixie fire last year, we would just have bright orange colors just covering a very large portion of this screen. So again, definitely a fire going on. It's threatening structures, the giant sequoias, but not as bad as fires most likely in a month or two when the fuels continue to dry out. And then the reason for that is just the more moisture that's in fuels, the harder it is for the fuels to combust. I always equate this to if you're starting a campfire with a moist log versus a dry log. Much easier to start the fire, and then it's going to burn a lot hotter and faster if you're using a dry log. So this is just another shot of the fire over the last 3 hours. And there's definitely some smoke coming off of it, and right there you can actually start to see those bigger plumes that we were picking up on the satellite imagery. We have another shot of it from right here. This one's a little bit farther away, but you can actually see that smoke layer right there. And you can also get an idea of what kind of vegetation we have in this area. Looks like it's a good amount of timber out there. It's a shame we're not even closer than that. We'll be able to look at some better photos in a second once we get to the new Watch Duty app. Very exciting developments when it comes to wildfire forecasting technology. And then just one last shot right there. Yeah, that gives us a little better idea of some of the fuels. If you look very closely at some of these fuels, you notice it looks like there's a lot of dead trees in this area. And we could actually pull up the tree mortality viewer later in this video just to get an idea of that. You know, while we're thinking about it, might as well just try to pull it up right now. So this is something that shows where a lot of the dead trees in California are. The reason we think about this is because if you have a bunch of dead trees, it's just basically fuel for a wildfire. And looks like they've updated this since the last time I pulled it up. But I believe that color right there just represents where all the dead trees are, tier 2 hazard zones. Yeah, something to think about right there, but we won't spend too much on time of that because I want to get to exactly where this fire is. So this is where the satellites are picking up some of the hot spots right now. You notice all those dots right there. Up to the northwest, that's where we have Wawona, South Wawona. We have Wawona Road. And it looks like some of those hot spots have started to jump over Wawona Road. But I think a key thing that I always point out with these hot spots is it's not perfect, as you can imagine. It's picking up these heat signatures from space. So while it's a general representation of where this fire is, it's certainly not spot on, and that's something I'll also say about this map as well, but even more so for this map because this will have large blocks. But the reason I like to pull this one up is because it shows where kind of the active perimeters are. So if we just go MODIS and VIIRS, that's what we were just looking at on that other map with all those hotspots right there. But then if we look at all satellites, it'll show where some of the recent hotspots are, and it looks like it's been moving up towards the northeast. So that is expected. That's the same general direction that it was moving yesterday. Whenever you get winds blowing from the southwest, it's going to push that fire towards the northeast. We got some spots last night as well. Now the best way to actually figure out where this fire is if we check it out on Google Earth. Zooming in right here, so just to get an idea of where this is. It's almost directly east of San Jose. It's 30 miles south of Yosemite National Park. Or no, it's in Yosemite National Park, but I believe it's 30 miles south of Yosemite Valley. So zooming in right here, you can see what this fire looks like. Now there's that Mariposa Grove of giant sequoias. That's one of the main things people are concerned about with this fire because we have all those redwood trees that I believe have been around for 2,000 years, some of the largest living things on planet Earth. And earlier in our newscast this morning, we actually played one video where they were wrapping the bottom of the trees in tinfoil just in case the fire worked its way in there so that it would limit the amount of damage to the redwood trees. Even though giant sequoias I don't think I could technically call them redwood trees. I think giant sequoias are technically different than redwood trees, but they're in the same sort of family. But the good news is they do have very thick bark that's generally fire resistant. But what can happen is if you have a lot of fuel buildup around those trees over long periods of time, the fire can get so intense that it overwhelms the tree's natural defenses. So that's where the fire is right now. That's where the Mariposa Grove is, and that's the grizzly giant. That's, I think, the most famous of these trees. Let's see if we can check out a picture of it. Yeah, you can see how big some of these trees are right there. Now, the good thing about a lot of these trees, you notice there's not a lot of leaves or vegetation down on the base. So, and then if the bark is super thick and basically fire resistant, it has evolved so that a fire could just go right around it, not really harm it all that much. But where these fires in giant sequoias do get bad is where if you have a lot of fuel buildup, where it's a lot of brush or other types of trees stretching all the way up into this area, once that catches, then it can damage the tree a lot. So then let's also click on that one. Oh, that's an interesting shot right there, the clothespin tree. And then lastly, let's see what photo we have for the Mariposa Grove. Just an idea of what is potentially threatened by this fire. Now, I do want to just go back right here because we can do something on this map that's pretty interesting. One, we can look at the fire history, and that's where some of the good news comes in. It looks like we had the South Fork fire in 2017, so that's going to create a natural barrier where a lot of those fuels have already been cleared out in the past. And it's interesting that that looks like it's where the heat signature is showing up. But based on the fact that we had this fire there in 2017, I would actually be surprised if it has moved that far into this area. Because, again, we've seen this time and time again on a lot of these wildfire forecast videos where a fire will bump right into a previous burn and then just stop. And that just tells you the effectiveness of prescribed burning, or in some cases allowing fires to burn until they are threatening structures. Now, speaking of structures, that is something else we can pull up. We'll just use MODIS and VIIRS for now because those are a little bit accurate than those giant rectangles. And look at these structures. It looks like we have most of the structures down to the southwest and then up here towards the northwest as well. It's a shame there's not city names on here. One thing we can do is use a ruler right here, take the distance, we'll take that cluster of structures right there and go to the nearest hotspot. That looks to be about under a mile right there. So I do know Wildfire Operations was working very hard to put in a lot of fire retardant here. They have a lot of crews on the ground working this fire, and we'll take a look at all those wildfire operations statistics in a second. But first, I do want to see if we can figure out where those structures are. So it looks like if we zoom out, we have those structures to the southwest. That's most likely Fish Camp right there that we're looking at. And then towards the northwest, which is the one I'd say I'm more concerned about because of the direction of winds and the recent spot fires that we have had. It looks, yeah, this is North Wawona right there. And if we turn it around, we should be able to see where that fire is. So the good news on this, if you notice, it'll have to go downhill to get to North Wawona. Usually during the nighttime hours is when you get those winds pushing downhill. That's actually something we did see last night. You can see a couple of these spots right there. That was because we got those downslope winds overnight, took some of the burning embers in here, threw them over the fire retardant lines that they dropped in the day, started these new little spot fires. And based on what the winds are doing and some of that increase in fire behavior that we're seeing in the last hour or two, I wouldn't be surprised if we've had more spotting since this fire data was taken. So that's another thing I'll say. They get this data from, they have to fly over the fire and take infrared data, so it's not completely up to date, but it is the best that we have to work with right now. So that's, I think, the key thing that we'll be watching, North Wawona to where that fire is. Expecting that fire to continue to spot downhill, especially overnight, and then what'll happen is it'll burn right back up into itself. But we'll continue to watch that. And then finally, let's just get to some of the kind of statistics on this fire. Right now, it's showing up as 703 acres right there. First thing I should probably say is, looks like there's a new evacuation order for Wawona and Wawona Campground, saying please leave immediately. If we look at where these evacuation orders are, there's the evacuation order for Wawona area, and then fire advisory for the wilderness area up there. Now, normally I'm hesitant to show evacuation orders in my videos because a lot of people will watch the videos later, so this might not actually be up to date by the time you're watching this. So I did put the link in the description, and you'll be able to click that and see how these evacuation orders might have changed over the last hour or whenever you end up watching this video. So coming back here, we can just get an idea about this fire, and I actually haven't been following it too closely just because I've been officially wrapping up my master's thesis, which is based on all of this kind of stuff. It's based on wildfire research in California. I'm basically figuring out the thresholds where wildfire becomes more dangerous. Looks like it's about 75 degrees or 10% fuel moisture, all kinds of other numbers, where your likelihood of burning more than 10,000 acres in a day just rapidly increases. And I'll do a full video on my master's thesis at some point because there is some pretty interesting results that I think could have some big impacts when it comes to the wildfire operations and forecasting. I'll certainly be using some of my numbers this year. So Washburn Fire was reported in the afternoon of July 7th near the Washburn Trail of Yosemite National Park. And looks like they've had a lot of attack on this fire, using a lot of resources, dropping some retardant. Mariposa Grove was evacuated, remains temporarily closed. That's not a big surprise there. Oh, this is the part about the giant sequoias. So located in the southern portion of Yosemite, the Mariposa Grove of giant sequoias is the largest sequoia grove in Yosemite and is home to over 500 mature giant sequoias. Now, one good piece of news, I do know that they've had a number of prescribed burns in this area, and then we also saw that previous fire map that I was able to pull up, or fire history. So some of the fuels will be removed out of this area, but what can happen is if you have a prescribed fire 15 years ago, in that time a lot of a lot of the fuels can grow back. So I'll try to pull up some of those prescribed maps in the future. But I think that's just information about the map. Evacuations and closures, we already looked at that. Weather, this is something that I have been following recently. A slow warming trend with clear skies will continue for several days. Highs will range from mid-80s to near 90 degrees under clear skies. Yeah, so we had actually a slight cooling trend today. There was a little trough that came through northern California, but that's going to be moving off, and then it looks like Sunday and Monday we're going to heat up by maybe 5 to 10 degrees. Inland areas probably even more than that. So I'm not overly concerned about this fire right now, just partially based on some of the activity. It's not the most extreme smoke plumes we've ever seen, although it does look like it is picking up in the last hour or two. But I think I am going to be more concerned about this in a number of days where that wildfire forecast, or the fire weather forecast, gets a little more challenging, where it's going to be hotter and drier. But it does look like there's more smoke kicking up recently. Looks like personnel 209. This was updated at 6 a.m. I'd imagine that number's come up since this morning. To 703 acres as of right now, but we'll see if that gets updated. Moderate fire behavior observed. That kind of goes along with what we've been saying. It doesn't look overly extreme, but certainly some smoke coming off on it. And weather concerns, increasing temperatures, decreasing humidity through the weekend, and then unfortunately through the start of next week as well. So if we come right here, already showed that. Right here, all right, that looks like a more updated number, 1,120 acres, and you can see it's still 0% containment. And, this is the new app that I was telling you about. This, I think, is honestly a game changer when it comes to wildfire communications. This app, you can get it on your phone. I have the phone version, and you can pull up the desktop version. I put the link in the description of this video. And it's not only great for just seeing where all the different fires are across California. Usually there's a bunch of other ones that pop up on here that you can click on. I think it just looks like this because I'm clicked on this one right now. But then you can click on the fire itself, and then it has the details, and it has a full timeline of what's going on. So, for example, at 11:51 a.m., we located a spot fire approximately 0.3 miles from structures off Forest Drive in Wawona. Ground resources trying to get eyes on it and have requested helicopters to start working on it. And then if we come up to the most recent one, activity increasing again and some spotting. You can watch a live view of the fire here. So live view is most likely one of these cameras right here. And actually it looks like that's continued to update too. So we'll come back to that maybe at the end of the video. Think that tells us some new information that the acres have gone up, but we did already see that there was some activity increasing, and we guessed that there was some new spotting, but there's our confirmation of it right there. Now, something that we can do, I want to see what the full weather forecast is for today, but then I also want to show what it's going to be moving forward, because that's actually where I have more concern. Little trick that I do, if you take your Latin law and put it into windy.com, delete the words, it'll take you right to where that fire is. Yeah, so right about there. This perfectly goes along with what we were saying about the direction of fire spread. You notice these winds coming from the southwest. So that's why that fire appears to be moving towards the northeast. We thought of that when we were looking at this map right here. I'll turn off structures so it's not too much. And then all satellites. Looks like some of that new heat activity that's popping up is towards the northeast, which goes along with these wind streams that you notice right there. So it looks like those gusts, 25 miles per hour. That's not terrible. We've obviously seen fires where it's 50, 60 miles per hour, but that is certainly going to lead to some spot fires as we're seeing right now. I'm interested to see what the humidity is. I think humidity's right here. Humidity, 25%. So that's fairly dry, but my research shows that it's a relative humidity below 17%, where the chances of a fire burning more than 10,000 acres in a day drastically increases. That's my definition of a large day of wildfire growth. So humidity is definitely dry, but not as dry as it could be. And then temperature-wise, 78 degrees, that's just slightly past the threshold I identified of 75 degrees. And then as we move forward, things are just unfortunately going to be getting warmer. If we look at Sunday, looks like your high is 81. If we look at Monday, looks like it's 86. Interested to see if it's going up on Tuesday. Yeah, it looks like last I checked, Monday was the peak of that warming trend. Looks like that's the case as well. Do want to check out the relative humidity expected on Monday. So 86 degrees there. Humidity dropping below that threshold value down to 16%. And then our winds on Monday, around 25 miles per hour once again. So definitely going to be keeping a close eye on this as we move forward. Sunday should likely have more fire activity than today. And then Monday should likely have more fire activity than any day we've seen so far with this fire. Unless, of course, they can have some amazing firefighting operations and basically get this thing under control. But I would be surprised, just based on what we're looking at on some of these live cams, how dry and dead a lot of these fuels look like. Some of the challenges in that fire weather forecast with it being hot, dry, and windy. This one does have a chance to burn for a while and continue to grow. That is one of the reasons that it is my first wildfire forecast of this season. Decided to bring the microphone back into action. Now, finally, we can check out that air quality forecast. That's what it looks like today. We'll get the legend on for you. It looks like it's still just moderate. That makes sense. There doesn't look like there's that much smoke coming off of it. And then tomorrow, expecting a similar forecast. Now, if we look at the smoke forecast right here, I like this one because it actually shows what direction that smoke is going to be going when it decides to work. Let's try to reload that page. Alright, that bottom one doesn't want to work, but we can pull up this one. You notice that smoke does look like it's moving off towards the north and northeast right there. Even in the overnight hours where you get those downslope winds, actually it's kind of stationary overnight because those winds die down. Then as you get into the afternoon, looks like it slightly changes direction. So overall, kind of the summary on the Washburn Fire looks like it's up over 1,000 acres, still at 0% containment. There's a lot of dead, dry fuels in this area, so I'm expecting the growth to continue right there, but then we also have very hot and dry conditions expected for Sunday and Monday. I'd say the day that we're going to be following this fire the most closely is going to be Monday, as it's going to be in the mid-80s with relative humidity in the mid-teens. So definitely a fire that we're going to have to keep our eye on. Let me know if you guys have any questions, and I'll be sure to try to answer those in future videos. So that's our update and forecast for the Washburn Fire. I'll see you all next time.